The day Claire Bennett walked out of St. Mary's Hospital wearing a rigid back brace and carrying nothing except a faded overnight bag and a rusted brass key, she still believed the worst part of her life was over. She didn't yet know that the abandoned cannery waiting at the edge of Monterey Bay held secrets powerful enough to destroy her ex-husband's empire, expose crimes buried for decades, and turn the woman he discarded into the one person capable of bringing him to his knees. Just 24 hours earlier, Claire had still been Ethan Bennett's wife. For 22 years, she had stood beside him while he transformed Bennett Fisheries from a failing family operation into one of the most powerful seafood companies on the West Coast. Back when they first met, Ethan was nothing more than a stubborn young dock worker with rough hands, an aging pickup truck, and 3 barely functioning fishing boats inherited from his late father, Harold Bennett. Claire had been a nursing student then, working night shifts at a diner near Fisherman's Wharf just to pay tuition. They built their life the hard way. Claire worked double shifts at the hospital, while Ethan spent freezing mornings out on the Pacific trying to keep the family business alive. There were years when they couldn't afford proper furniture. Years when Claire secretly skipped meals so Ethan could pay his cruise. When their son, Mason, was born, Claire practically raised him alone because Ethan was always chasing contracts, investors, or expansion deals. But she never complained. Everyone in Monterey admired them. Ethan became the local success story people talked about in newspapers and country clubs. Bennett Fisheries expanded from fishing into packaging, distribution, exports, and eventually luxury waterfront development. Their modest coastal home turned into a multi-million-dollar mansion overlooking the ocean cliffs outside Carmel. Politicians attended their parties. Magazine reporters called them Monterey royalty. Yet somewhere along the way, Ethan changed. The hunger that once made him ambitious slowly became something colder. More ruthless. Claire noticed it in small moments first. The way he dismissed long-time employees after they became inconvenient. The way he stopped asking about her days at the hospital. The way every conversation became about profit, appearances, or power. By the time Claire turned 47, she often felt more like a decorative object in Ethan's carefully constructed life than his wife. Then came the pain in her back. At first, she ignored it. Nurses were used to exhaustion. But within months, the pain became unbearable. One afternoon, while helping lift a patient, Claire collapsed onto the hospital floor, unable to move her legs. Doctors discovered severe spinal compression that required immediate surgery. Recovery could take months, maybe longer. For the first time in decades, Claire became dependent on someone else. Ethan appeared supportive in public. He held her hand during consultations, sat beside her hospital bed whenever visitors arrived, told reporters and friends he was stepping away from business temporarily to care for his wife. But Claire began noticing strange things. Ethan constantly taking calls outside the room, lawyers visiting his office late at night, financial documents disappearing from their home study. Even Mason, now away at college in Chicago, sensed tension every time he called. The surgery itself lasted 9 hours. When Claire finally woke up, groggy and weak beneath fluorescent hospital lights, Ethan kissed her forehead and told her everything would be okay. She wanted to believe him. But the next morning, less than a day after surgeons had fused sections of her spine together, Ethan walked into her hospital room with 2 attorneys carrying leather briefcases. Claire still remembered the exact sound of the papers sliding across the hospital tray table. Divorce documents. At first, she genuinely thought it was some kind of cruel misunderstanding. Ethan's face looked emotionless, almost bored, as one of the lawyers calmly explained that irreconcilable differences had led to the filing. Claire could barely process the words through the medication haze. "You're divorcing me?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and avoided eye contact. Then came the real blow. Nearly every major asset they owned had already been moved months earlier into protected trusts and corporate entities solely under Ethan's control. The mansion wasn't legally theirs together. Neither were the boats, the company accounts, or the investment properties. Claire discovered that while she had been scheduling surgeries and caring for patients, Ethan had quietly spent over a year restructuring everything behind her back. Her name had been erased from nearly every corner of the empire she helped build. Worse still, rumors spreading through Monterey suddenly made sense. Ethan had been involved with Vanessa Marlowe, a wealthy San Francisco real estate developer nearly 20 years younger than Claire. Vanessa specialized in luxury coastal redevelopment projects and had recently partnered with Ethan on plans to transform old sections of Cannery Row into elite waterfront resorts for billionaires. Claire felt physically sick, not just from betrayal, but from humiliation. Nurses she had worked beside for years avoided eye contact as Ethan's attorneys discussed settlements while she still wore a hospital wristband. The final agreement left her with almost nothing beyond a modest monthly payment designed to disappear after a few years. Ethan wanted her gone quietly before the public learned anything messy about Monterey's golden couple. 3 weeks later, Claire left the hospital and returned not to her home, but to a small temporary rental apartment arranged by Ethan's legal team. Most of her belongings had already been packed away, some missing entirely, family photographs gone, furniture replaced. It was as if Ethan had begun erasing her existence before the surgery even happened. For days, Claire barely unpacked. She moved slowly through constant pain, surviving on medication and sleepless nights. Then one evening, while sorting through the last box sent from the mansion, she found something strange buried beneath old papers and jewelry. A small rusted brass key attached to a faded paper tack. Written in worn black ink were 2 words, Cannery 14. Claire frowned immediately. She recognized the name. Cannery 14 was one of the oldest abandoned sardine packing plants along Monterey's waterfront, shuttered decades earlier after the fishing industry collapsed. Tourists passed the crumbling structure every day without noticing it. The place had belonged to Ethan's father long ago, but everyone believed it had been empty for years. Claire remembered Harold Bennett once giving her the key during a Christmas dinner nearly a decade earlier, telling her quietly, "One day you may need this more than Ethan ever will." At the time, she had laughed and forgotten about it. Now, staring at the rusted key in her trembling hand while rain battered the apartment windows outside, Claire realized it was the only thing anyone in the Bennett family had truly left her. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the heartbreak and humiliation, a feeling began growing stronger with every passing second. Harold Bennett had given her that key for a reason. Claire barely slept that night. Long after the rain stopped falling over Monterey, she sat alone in the dim apartment staring at the rusted brass key resting on the kitchen table beside a bottle of pain medication. Every part of her body hurt. The surgery had left a deep ache running from her lower spine down through her legs, and even standing for more than a few minutes felt like punishment. But the pain inside her chest was worse. 22 years of loyalty had been erased in a matter of weeks. Ethan had already moved on publicly with Vanessa Marlowe, smiling for photographers at charity events while Claire recovered alone in silence. Monterey loved success, and Ethan Bennett was still the town's golden man. Nobody wanted to believe the story behind the headlines. Nobody wanted to imagine that the wealthy seafood king who donated to hospitals and funded local festivals had served his wife divorce papers the day after major surgery. By morning, Claire made a decision she couldn't fully explain even to herself. She slipped the brass key into her coat pocket, climbed carefully into her old SUV, and drove toward Cannery Row. Fog rolled heavily across the Pacific coastline as she passed souvenir shops, seafood restaurants, and luxury hotels built where working fishermen once unloaded sardines by the ton. Monterey had changed over the years. The old fishing town Ethan grew up in had slowly become a playground for tourists and investors. But near the far edge of the harbor, beyond the crowded waterfront attractions, the landscape shifted. The buildings became older, rusted, forgotten, and there, hidden behind collapsing chain-link fencing and overgrown weeds, stood Cannery 14. The massive structure looked almost swallowed by time. Salt air had eaten away much of the metal siding, and broken windows stared out toward the ocean like empty eyes. Waves crashed violently against the rocks below the cliffside foundation, while seagulls circled overhead screaming into the gray morning sky. Claire parked slowly and stepped out, wincing from the pain in her back. For a moment, she simply stared at the faded lettering still barely visible above the entrance. Bennett Packing Company. Seeing Ethan's family name painted across the rotting building made anger rise inside her all over again. She almost turned around. But then she remembered sitting helpless in that hospital bed while Ethan calmly destroyed her life with lawyers and paperwork. So instead, Claire tightened her coat against the cold wind and walked toward the entrance. The lock looked ancient. Rust covered nearly every inch of metal. Yet when Claire slid the brass key inside, it fit perfectly. The heavy door groaned loudly as it opened inward, releasing a stale gust of salt, dust, and machine oil trapped for decades. Inside, the cannery felt like a graveyard frozen in time. Massive rusted conveyor belts stretched across the factory floor beneath hanging chains and broken lights. Old packing machines sat abandoned beneath layers of dust. Wooden crates stamped with faded shipping labels remained stacked near loading docks, as if workers had simply vanished one day and never returned. Claire moved cautiously through the shadows, her footsteps echoing across the enormous building. She expected silence. Instead, she noticed something strange almost immediately. Electricity. One dim industrial light flickered weakly near a far hallway. Claire frowned. Cannery 14 was supposed to have been abandoned for over 30 years. Yet somewhere inside the building, power was still running. Her pulse quickened as she followed the hallway deeper into the structure. The further she walked, the cleaner things became. Dust disappeared. Floors looked recently swept. Then she reached a frosted glass office door at the end of the corridor. Painted across the glass in fading gold letters were two words: Harold Bennett. Ethan's father. Claire froze. Harold had died nearly 12 years earlier from a heart attack, but standing there suddenly brought back memories she hadn't thought about in years. Unlike Ethan, Harold had always treated Claire like family from the beginning. Quiet and old-fashioned, he distrusted wealth and hated what Monterey's waterfront was becoming. He often argued with Ethan over the company's expansion plans, especially after developers began buying coastal property around Cannery Row. Ethan once called his father a bitter old fisherman stuck in the past. Now Claire slowly pushed open the office door. The room shocked her instantly. It wasn't abandoned at all. Everything inside had been preserved almost perfectly. Bookshelves lined the walls beside neatly organized filing cabinets. Dust covered some surfaces, but not heavily. More alarming were the fresh documents stacked across the desk. Shipping invoices dated only months earlier. Updated financial records. Harbor permits. Someone had been using this office recently. Claire's breathing grew shallow as she stepped further inside. Then she noticed a locked filing cabinet against the back wall. Unlike the others, this cabinet looked newer. Another small brass key had already been left inserted into the drawer lock. Claire hesitated before opening it. Inside were dozens of folders packed tightly together. At first, the documents seemed confusing. Offshore account numbers, shipping manifests, environmental inspection reports, payment transfers to shell companies in Panama and Singapore. But as Claire continued reading, the horrifying picture became clearer. Ethan's empire had been built on corruption far deeper than she ever imagined. For years, Bennett Fisheries had secretly dumped industrial waste into protected coastal waters while bribing inspectors to hide violations. Fake shipping companies moved money overseas through fraudulent export contracts. Politicians received payments disguised as development consulting fees. Claire's hands shook harder with every page she turned. The man she married wasn't simply ruthless. He was dangerous. Then she discovered a second folder hidden beneath the others. Unlike the financial records, this folder contained property documents, legal ownership transfers, trust agreements. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw her own name printed across the final page. Cannery 14 legally belonged to Claire Bennett. Harold Bennett had transferred ownership nearly 10 years earlier through a private, holding trust unknown to Ethan. Attached to the paperwork was a handwritten letter folded carefully inside an envelope. Claire recognized Harold's handwriting instantly. "Claire," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then Ethan finally became the man I feared he would become. There are truths buried beneath this cannery that he was never meant to control. I built safeguards long before he realized what I knew about him. Trust nobody connected to the company. And whatever happens next, remember this place was never abandoned. It was protected." Claire stared at the final sentence repeatedly. Protected from what? Suddenly, a loud metallic crash echoed somewhere upstairs. Claire jumped violently, pain shooting through her spine. Another sound followed. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps moving across the factory floor above the office. Her pulse exploded with panic. Someone else was inside the cannery. Then came voices. Male voices. Angry. Searching. Claire quickly shut the filing cabinet and turned off the office light, just as another noise echoed through the hallway outside. Whoever had entered the building clearly wasn't there by accident. And deep down, Claire already knew the terrifying truth. Ethan must have realized too late what Harold had hidden inside Cannery 14. And now someone had come to make sure those secrets disappeared forever. Claire killed the office light and pressed herself against the wall as footsteps echoed through the cannery hallway outside. Her entire body tightened with fear. The pain in her spine throbbed violently from the sudden movement, but she forced herself to stay silent. Through the frosted glass, she saw shadows past the office door. 2 men, large builds, dark jackets. One carried a flashlight, while the other spoke into a phone in a low voice Claire could barely hear. "She came here," the man muttered. "Her car's outside." Claire's stomach dropped instantly. Ethan knew. Somehow, he knew she had gone to Cannery 14. The second man shoved open nearby doors while searching the hallway. "Boss said get every file," he growled. "No mistakes this time." Claire's pulse hammered so hard she thought they would hear it. Her eyes darted desperately around Harold Bennett's office, searching for another exit. Then she noticed something unusual behind the old wooden desk. A section of bookshelf slightly crooked compared to the others. Fighting through the pain, Claire moved quickly and pulled against the shelf just as footsteps approached the office door. The bookshelf shifted inward with a heavy click, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness beneath the cannery. Claire slipped inside seconds before the office door burst open behind her. She pulled the hidden entrance closed just as flashlight beams swept across the room. Her breathing became shallow in the darkness. She stood frozen on the staircase listening to the men tearing through the office above. Filing cabinets slammed open. Papers scattered. One of the men cursed loudly. "The files are gone." Claire carefully descended the staircase deeper underground until the sounds above became muffled echoes. The air beneath the cannery felt damp and cold, carrying the scent of seawater and rusted metal. Small industrial lights lined the tunnel walls, glowing dimly as if someone maintained them regularly. That terrified her even more. Harold's letter had been telling the truth. This place was never abandoned. The tunnel stretched far beneath the harbor before opening into something Claire never could have imagined. Massive underground chambers spread out beneath Monterey Bay, hidden directly below the cannery. Large refrigerated storage rooms hummed quietly beside loading platforms connected to concealed boat docks carved into the cliffs beneath the ocean. Crates of seafood sat stacked beside modern shipping equipment. Fuel generators ran steadily in isolated rooms. The entire underground operation looked active. Operational. Secret. Claire stared in disbelief. Harold Bennett had built an entire hidden distribution network beneath Cannery 14. But why? Then she saw the photographs. Framed pictures hanging inside a small office near the docks. Harold standing beside fisherman Ethan had forced out of business years earlier. Harbor workers. Small family boat owners. Men whose livelihoods vanished after Bennett Fisheries monopolized Monterey's seafood industry. Claire slowly began piecing the truth together. Harold had discovered Ethan's corruption long before anyone else. And instead of confronting him publicly, he secretly built a parallel operation beneath the cannery, one designed to protect independent fishermen and preserve part of the original family business away from Ethan's control. Harold hadn't trusted his own son. He had trusted Claire. Suddenly, headlights flashed through the underground dock entrance. Claire quickly hid behind stacked crates as a small fishing boat pulled silently into the cavern. 2 older fishermen stepped out carrying supplies. The moment they spotted Claire, both men froze in shock. "Claire," one of them whispered. She recognized him instantly. Walter Grady, one of Ethan's oldest former captains who had mysteriously disappeared from Bennett Fisheries nearly 8 years earlier. "What are you doing here?" Claire asked shakily. Walter exchanged nervous glances with the second man before answering. "Harold told us if anything ever happened to him, you'd come eventually." Claire could barely process the words. Over the next hour, hidden beneath the harbor while Ethan's men searched above, Walter revealed everything. Harold had spent years secretly gathering evidence against Ethan after discovering illegal dumping operations and money laundering inside Bennett Fisheries. But Harold knew Ethan had become too powerful politically to stop through normal channels. So he created a hidden safeguard beneath Cannery 14. an independent network funded through concealed accounts tied legally to Claire through the property trust. Harold believed Ethan would eventually destroy himself through greed. And when that happened, Claire would become the only person capable of exposing him safely. Walter opened a locked storage room deeper inside the underground chambers. Inside were dozens of sealed filing boxes containing years of financial records, video evidence, environmental reports, offshore banking transfers, and signed agreements connecting Ethan to bribed officials across California's coastal development industry. It was enough evidence to destroy not only Bennett Fisheries, but half the political elite tied to Monterey's waterfront redevelopment projects. Claire sat silently for a long moment staring at the boxes. She thought about simply taking the hidden money Harold left behind and disappearing forever, starting over somewhere far away from Monterey. But then she remembered every cruel moment in that hospital room. The humiliation, the betrayal, the years she sacrificed helping Ethan build his empire while he secretly prepared to erase her from it. Ethan believed she was weak because she had loved him. He believed kindness made people powerless. Claire slowly looked up at Walter. "Call the federal investigators," she said quietly. Everything exploded after that. Within days, federal agents swarmed Monterey. News helicopters circled above Cannery Row while investigators raided Bennett Fisheries headquarters, luxury offices, and waterfront development sites connected to Ethan and Vanessa Marlowe. National media descended on the coastal town as decades of corruption unraveled publicly. Secret offshore accounts, environmental crimes, illegal land seizures, bribed inspectors, money laundering through seafood export contracts. One by one, Ethan's political allies turned against him to save themselves. Some vanished from public view entirely. Others immediately cooperated with investigators. The mighty Bennett empire collapsed almost overnight. But the story that captured the country wasn't just the corruption scandal. It was Claire, the wife discarded after spinal surgery, who uncovered the truth hidden beneath an abandoned cannery. Interviews flooded television networks. Reporters camped outside the harbor, hoping for a glimpse of her. Yet Claire refused nearly every offer. She didn't want fame. She wanted peace. Months later, after federal courts froze most of Ethan's remaining assets, Claire made one final decision that stunned Monterey again. Instead of selling Cannery 14 to developers for millions, she reopened it as a nonprofit fishing cooperative, helping local families destroyed by Ethan's monopoly regain ownership of their businesses. Slowly, life returned to the waterfront. Fishing boats docked beneath the cannery once more. Workers repaired old equipment. Families who once feared losing everything finally had stable income again. Cannery 14 became a symbol of something Monterey thought it had lost forever: honesty. Ethan Bennett's final visit came nearly a year later. By then, he looked nothing like the powerful businessman who once controlled the entire coastline. Federal charges had stripped away his fortune, his reputation, and nearly every ally he once trusted. His expensive suits were gone. So was the confidence. Claire found him standing alone inside Harold's old office, one foggy morning staring out toward the harbor. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Ethan turned toward her, bitterness burning in his tired eyes. "You ruined me," he said quietly. Claire looked at the rusted brass key resting on Harold's desk between them, the same key Ethan considered worthless. Then she calmly answered, "No, Ethan. You ruined yourself the moment you believed I had nothing left." Outside the office windows, fishing boats moved across Monterey Bay beneath the rising morning sun. And for the first time since the surgery that nearly broke her life apart, Claire realized something extraordinary. Ethan had taken almost everything from her. Her marriage, her home, her future. But in the end, the one thing he overlooked, an abandoned cannery and a rusted brass key, became the very thing that saved her life and destroyed his forever.